My name is Samuel Jonathan, and I'd like to welcome you to yet.
Thank you so much for staying with us. It's still the Breakfast Show on Ghana Television, and it's Thursday, and so we do business here. Now, we will be talking about effective budgeting and cost control. In a very competitive business environment, effective budgeting and cost control are very key to ensuring the successful implementation of your strategic business agenda. And it's therefore very imperative for everyone who wants to actually succeed in the field of finance and business in general to be fully aware of how to develop a good budget in order for them to really control the cost elements in whatever they do and manage their businesses effectively. This morning, I have with me Professor Rajesh Arora.
Good morning to you.
Rajesh, right?
That's right.
Okay, and he's from the King's University College. He's actually the vice president there, and he will be telling us more about this topic and some of the related issues. Thank you so much, Prof, for joining me.
Good morning.
Right, good morning. This is your first time
That's right.
on TV in
That's
Ghana.
right. Yes.
Right, so welcome to GTV. Now, so tell me, what is effective budgeting, first of all?
I say that every decision you take in life has a cost implication.
Okay.
So whenever people decide to budget, it's just not for organizations. It's for people like you and me too.
Oh, okay.
And everyone starts thinking about it.
Right.
I think every individual in this world struggle with resources. Organizations, you look at it from physical, financial, legal, technological resource. We are living in a constrained economy. It's very essential for us to be very calculative in using these resources.
Okay.
And hence we say that we just don't do budgeting, but we do effective budgeting so that we are able to allocate resources to the requirements which is required in the organizations to work out.
So how will an effective budget look like? What really is the difference between just a normal budget and an effective budget?
Sure. Well, when we say budgeting, the first principle that comes in our mind is that what would be our top line?
Okay.
What's our revenue? Because without that, the profits cannot be calculated. I think years back in school life, we were taught a simple principle: sales minus cost is profit.
Yeah.
And that's what we start working on here too.
Right.
But when we want to make it very effective, we say that it's essential for us to know what are the organizational goals are. And how do we see this organization growing in the next financial year and years to come. So scenario plannings are extremely important in organizations today to look at it. And if I compare it from the individual perspective, it's also important for them to look from the angle as to how do they see their career progressing in next 3 or 5 years time and how their income also grows. So in effective budgeting, it's important that whatever we make it, it should be aligned with the organizational goal. We do strategic planning exercises within the organization and see what the organization can really achieve.
Interesting. And so how different is that from cost control?
We say that cost control as an element at any point of time is just not controlling cost. It's more of managing cost, actually. I would put it this way.
Managing cost.
Because the moment you start controlling cost, it has a lot of effect on the culture, motivation of people. It's very important for us to take them along with us when we really want to manage the cost. Budget communicates to us very clearly that what resources are available to us and we need to manage those resources within that. Whereas when we look at cost control, managing cost, we say it's important for us to know what the organization priorities are and how the organization wishes to spend now or it should be spent later.
So in effect, you're saying that the managing cost and then effective budgeting, they have some similarities, don't they? So strike the similarities for us.
Between the two, when we start looking at it, the first aspect comes up is that without the budget, you cannot manage your cost. Right? But if you want to fix up your budget, it's very essential for us to look from the perspective, have we set the realistic goals for the organization? So the entire process starts from the goal setting exercise for the organization, for the at the macro level, at the corporate level, which gets translated to business goals, and then it gets translated to departmental goals.
All right.
So from the goals, we are moving on to the budgeting exercise, and once the budgets are approved, right, and they are implemented, we start looking at managing cost.
And so now let's get into the process of preparing a budget. What do you really do when you're preparing a budget in line with your strategic plan, as you said earlier?
Fantastic. I think I love this question. When we talk about preparing budget, it's definitely a long exercise. We always say that if your financial year starts from January to December, ideally this kind of exercises in every organization should work out somewhere from October onwards for the next financial year, a quarter in advance. Now, because you have to start looking at a lot of things. One traditional method we look at is that we look at previous budgets, and we start upscaling the budget in such a way that, because we say the cost levels have gone up, but at the same time we need to see what are the targets we are going to achieve, and what profitability we would like to keep it, what would be my top line and what would be my bottom line. A very traditional method. I always say to organizations whenever I've gone for workshops and training people on strategic management initiative is, a regular exercise of research should be done by every corporate, by every employee, to find out what competitors are doing, what are the changes that are taking place in political, economic, social, technological, legal environments. This helps a lot. If this information is available on month-to-month basis, marketing activities that are happening all around, you are able to collect a lot of cost data, which helps you for the next year. Right. But when you start doing this exercise in October, November and says that give me a budget, so you can't get more than escalating 10-15% of your cost and saying that this is how I would look at it. So if proper research is done, then you would see that the budget makes more sense for the organization to look at it.
Interesting. And what are cost control tools or cost management tools? What are some of the ways that you can actually do that? What are some of the strategies available to be able to accomplish that?
Well, I always say first is that we need to see that we always say when we want to manage cost, the cost is more controlled first when I sign a contract with my supplier. But once I sign the contract, it becomes uncontrollable. Now, what does that mean? Is that till the time of contract, I was knowing this is what I'm going to pay. But tomorrow, you find that there are certain escalations happens in the project. You find that you pay more. So you sign escalation clauses too. But yes, most important, we always say communicating with employees manages the cost well. It enhances the performance of an organization.
How?
The first thing is that if the employee is linked with the organizational goals, is knowing about what the departmental goals are, what are they supposed to achieve. It would really help every person to know how do I manage my work. That's very important. Even a salesperson who sells one unit in the company, it adds to the profitability of an organization. And that's how it's working out. So when we look at it, I say communication is one of the element, getting people involved in the system, not using a top-down approach at any point of time where we say that we get a lot of information. So we look at that, which allows us to manage our cost very well. From the top management perspective, it's extremely important for us to look how do we do walk the talk. That means we're saying, if I'm going to say that we need to manage our cost well, it's essential that I really manage my office cost also well.
Which means the things that you buy, and use within the establishment itself.
So it's just not for my employees to communicate, hey, look, manage the cost, but I will also be a part to it. So that's how we start looking at that perspective. So we say managing the cost well makes a lot of sense there. As we say, walk the talk. A leadership approach. That means it starts from you. The discipline starts from you. We also start looking out from the culture aspect, because if you say that I want to run a lean and mean organization, it does not mean that you start cutting corners, because that means compromising with the culture, and that has a very demotivating effect on employees sometimes. So we start looking at that too.
What's management variance reports? What are they?
Sure. When we have the budgets which are prepared, and we start looking at the item by item, each and every activity which has been budgeted,
Right.
how much have we been able to spend on that? So we start looking at the budgeted information, the budgeted cost, and we start looking at what is my actual expenditure.
Okay.
Now, if it is in expenses, it makes sense to say that my variance is favorable, that I spend less, I had budgeted more. When it comes to revenue, you may budget something, but you would like to see your variance is favorable there, that you are able to sell more than what you have budgeted. In reality, I always say that if organization starts being very honest on budgets, then the deficits are going to be much larger at any point of time. So we always try to pad up the budgets, which I always say as a good exercise in effective budgeting. We shouldn't do that, so that we become realistic and people know what they're supposed to achieve.
So the cost or management tools that you talked about earlier, how do you use those to analyze, your management variance reports?
Very nice. When we start looking at a step-by-step approach of analyzing the variances, the first aspect that comes to our mind is that why these variances have come, what was the cost, right? Was this cost unaccountable? Was that not thought of at the time of preparing a budget? Can we apportion some apportionment of this cost in future? So we start looking at those issues at any point of time. So step by step we start working out on those elements which allows us to understand where the variances have come up. I always say again, culture plays a very important role as to how you spend. A fantastic line which I read in one of the book, it says that I don't know what you value, but if you show me your budget, I can tell you what you value.
Okay. So
That
budgets are very good indicators of what really the priorities are.
100%.
Interesting. And now, so how effective are budgets in controlling, or let me stop using the controlling. You said you want to use managing
yes,
costs.
that's right.
Yeah. How effective are budgets in managing costs?
Well, see, if we really want to manage that cost, then I think monthly meetings are extremely important for
Okay.
us. Review of those targets are important for us. How are we working on it? So we start looking at those aspects of the nature.
Okay.
Communicating with people, which I said earlier also, that makes more sense for us. So a step-by-step approach has to be used there.
And what are some of the challenges that come up when somebody wants to have an effective budget that can be used to manage costs?
I would say now, instead of the effective, I say implementing the budget.
All right.
The challenges that comes up. And I always say that work never gives you stress, people do.
Okay.
And the first aspect that always comes up is that whether people are aligned with that budgeting thoughts. How does that work out? If you look at a salesperson or a sales management team which will prepare a budget, they would give you a budget which is going to be higher because they feel like this is what they want to show it to. But realistically, sometimes they will not be achieved. Some people may work out a budget which is lower than the target because they feel let's keep it a pessimistic approach.
Yeah.
Rather than being too optimistic about it. So both ways we start looking at it. So I always say that first is how you design the budget. That's one element which comes up in the process, and then how people implement the budget, what challenges that come up. As I talked about it right in the beginning of the show, where we said that continuous research is an extremely important element to know that how much are you able to do it. We don't do that research. So we don't have the cost figures available. So organizations should set up a separate department or a separate responsibility for people where they are able to say that, look, collect the data of cost so that when we prepare the budget, so we have the right information available.
Okay.
So this becomes another challenge for us to see that information which we are expecting for, we don't get on the right time. So as a result, we are left to assumptions.
Right. Right. Let's take a quick sip of our Lipton.
Sure.
Yeah, and
Cheers.
Lipton is the world's favorite hot tea, and that will give you the needed level of alertness for the day. It is going to just refresh you, give you vitality, and keep you going for the day. And so you too, start your day with Lipton, inspiration flowing from nature. We are discussing effective budgeting and cost control, and I have with me Professor Rajesh Arora. He is from the King's University College here in Accra. Prof, tell me, what's the role of finance in effective budgeting and also cost management?
Finance department is I would say, the controller of the entire budget.
Okay.
And I think they need to steer these discussions with everyone in the organization. And I think that's from where it starts and actually it ends. Because without the money, the business cannot function. And the finance department has a very important responsibility to project cash flows, project profitability, know what the growth are. Because when they are working on tight budgets, there are certain capital expenditures which an organization needs to make. There would be certain lease the organization would be taking. There would be certain capital at interest cost which the company would be taking. So there are lots of elements which are involved in this budgeting exercise, and finance plays a very important role in organizing all these events. You would see that in organizations where finance department send regular messages that we need to know the quarterly cash flow report, the inflows and the outflows, so that they are able to manage the finance as well. So if the budgets are prepared, then accordingly they have to start looking at it whether that's working out or not. So in one way they can also be a good watchdog to see that on a quarter-to-quarter basis the budget which has been approved, how it is getting implemented, so we can monitor it.
And picking from there, so it means that you can actually update the budget in the financial year.
Yes.
How do you do that?
We should be doing that because when we look at an environment in the current scenario today, very challenging. Competitive forces, marketing activities. Suddenly you may find companies coming out with new products. Your competitor has come out and they have come out in aggressive promotional plans, which you never thought in the third quarter of the year. So how do you manage that? Because you would find your sales going down. So obviously we start looking at that. How do we build up a procedure which says that, look, this is where we need to establish a challenge. We need to look at it in terms of how the budget needs to be improved upon. So nothing is written on stone. If there are certain elements which was not accounted, if the environmental situations have changed, if marketing scenarios have changed, if you find that the customer complaints have increased up and you will have to spend more to ensure to protect your business, I think we should make amendments in that.
And so once it's not straight-jacketed, so it means that it also affects your finances in a way, because you would need to inject more funds into maybe propping up maybe the promotional campaigns or some other things. And wouldn't that throw you off, because if you're going in a particular way, you've planned that you want to go this way, now that you have to now find other things to fix your situation, won't it throw you off gear?
For a second thought, I would say possibly yes. But if you look from a long-term perspective,
you
have to hold back. It's very essential for you because you have to drive your business, and nothing could be going at the cost of the business. So if you think that you are able to protect your business, if you are able to strategize it well, not an issue. So we start working on those subjects.
And so if you are drawing a budget, is there a need for you to keep some room for unaccounted expenses, or what normally we call miscellaneous items? Is there a need for that?
We can have miscellaneous expenses. We can talk about unaccounted budgets. But yes, these are all, you cannot project or predict everything in future. If we are all able to predict the future to an estimation, then you and me would be making more money. But yes, I would say that yes, we need to keep some miscellaneous expenses, some unaccounted expenses available, and I think that would be a very fair deal to make it happen, and this can be done based on past trends.
And you said earlier in your introduction that budgets are not just for businesses and organizations.
Yes.
So how do we also, improve our lives because of how we budget or manage our costs?
Great. One aspect which I always say is that economics has taught us is income minus consumption is saving. But when we have come to an environment right now, it says that first you save and then you spend on yourself. So that if you start buying things right now which you don't need, then probably you would start selling those things tomorrow to help yourself. So I would always say that every individual needs to look at its own inflows and outflows. As I was been teaching for last 20 years of my life, I think one message I have given to all my students also during the MBA programs is that we should always have an alternative income available.
Okay.
So that makes more sense. So what are those alternative incomes that could work out for you? So that's, I think, the first aspect to look at it for every individual as to from where they can get more money legally. That's how we talk about business.
Sure.
Right. And then we look at our own expenses. And I think the plastic money creates a lot of challenge for us sometimes, where we overspend ourselves and then we land into trouble.
Right.
So we look at it. Our monthly expenses, the budgets for individuals are much more simpler than organizations because our expenses are quite fixed in nature. But till the time we don't write down these expenses and check it out ourselves, we will not be able to identify which expenses are higher and lower.
Okay.
So we start looking at all those first.
Interesting. I've had a very good education this morning on budgeting and cost management.
Yes.
And I hope you too, you have enjoyed yourself getting some tidbits from Professor Rajesh Arora. He is from the King's University College, actually the vice president there. And so we will continue with the show. And just a quick reminder, GBC will be launching its digital terrestrial transmission channels live on Wednesday, that's the 26th of February 2014 at 6 p.m. prompt. GBC launches its digital channels live on Wednesday, 26th of February 2014 at 6 p.m. prompt. And then happy belated birthday to Mercy Wellington. You are a technician at GBC Studios here, and we really appreciate the work that you've been doing. May God bless you. And our next feature will take us to the on a tourism expedition at Liati Woti in the Volta region. Do enjoy it. And it's still Lifting, bringing you this wonderful show.
Thank you.
Mountain in Ghana.